Hi, and welcome back to the InduSoft Web Studio video training series. In this video, we're going to cover some more details about the animations. Okay, so in this video, we're going to continue on where we left off. I'm going to move some of these objects kind of out of the way so we've got some space here on the screen. And okay, so what I want to do is I want to kind of continue on talking about a little bit more details of animations. And let's go dive a little bit deeper into the command animation. Now, it's pretty common to put commands on buttons, but they can be put on other objects as well, rectangles and bitmaps and things of that nature, imported pictures. In this case, just going to give you an example, I will do a piece of text on here that says command animation. And we will add, let's see, what can we do? We can do something similar to what we did before with the incrementing values. We'll do xval, and we'll increment that. Let's just do it a little bit different. In this case, we'll do xval times 2, let's say. Add a little bit different expression in there. And now that I have that, what I want to do is take a look at this configuration dialog. Now what this is kind of an expanded view of the dialog that we were just on, so you can see that we can have that same expression here in the built-in language, and you can change that between the different types as well. But what it also gives us is these additional options down here: enabling focus, force, beep, release, require confirmation, e-signature, key only, and some security and disable features. So we're going to cover those. Notice that the enable focus is checked by default. If I was to copy this button, let's say, make a couple of these here, and go ahead and go into my runtime. When I run this, if I was to click on the command animation button here, notice that that receives focus, or you can see that little dotted line outline. If I had hit the tab key on my keyboard, it goes to the next one, goes to the next one, and I'm not clicking, I'm just hitting the tab key on my keyboard. And then when I hit it again, it goes to the next one, which happens to be on the navigation screen. And again, I'm not clicking. It comes back here to this point, and I'm not sure which one it went to next. Oh, it went to the temperature, and then back to this one. So it eventually rotates all the way through. But let's say we wanted to skip one of these. Let's say this middle one, we did not want it to ever receive focus when you hit tab. What we can do here on the configure screen is disable the enable focus, and now when we save that screen and run it up here, and I hit tab, it goes down to the temperature. I hit tab, and it goes over to the command animation. I hit tab again, and it skipped that middle one and went right to the third one. Now, tab order is something new in version 7.1. It used to be that the ID number, or the layer, was what controlled the tab order for objects and data entries and commands animations. There's a new feature here in version 7.1, and the ID will still continue to work if you brought a project forward from version 7.0. But I can right click on the background and click on tab order, and here we can see the order that is dictated by all the different objects in the screen and what will receive focus in what order, as long as it has a command animation assigned to it, or something that requires receiving focus. So I can change the order up, let's say, and let's say I want this to be the first one. I can click on that, this one to be the second one, and I can click on this one to be the third one. I can also double click and manually type in what will be the number. And notice that here I can get into groups of objects, and I can do subgroups and things of that nature. So that's what dictates the what tab order is. So in this case, I'm going to go turn off the tab order feature. I'm going to go back here and turn on the enable focus, and let's set that tab order again. Let's just change it up a little bit here. Set the tab order. We'll make this one 1. We'll make this one, make this one 1. Enter. we'll make this one 2 and this one 3, so that should go in kind of a strange order there. And now when we run it, you can see that the focus is there. I hit the tab key, it goes here. The next tab key goes there. The next one goes up to that one that was next in order. So this is a way that maybe you have data entry points or buttons around an irregular shaped object on your screen, and you want to prompt the operators to hit in a particular order. Maybe there's a welding sequence or something that makes particular sense to have in a particular order that's not necessarily columns or right to left. So you can force that tab order that way. That's what that checkbox is for. The next checkbox is for force. Now let's go take a look at what the force says in the help. If we come here to the context sensitive help, click here. Let me get all this on a single screen here and do this. The force checkbox here under the config says that when this option is checked, any tag that receives a value will generate events based on its change, even if the tag does not change. So what this means is there are places within InduSoft Web Studio fields that are looking for tags to change. Not necessarily false to true only, but if they change from false to true, true to false, or even any value change. Let's say it goes from 0 to 25 or 25 to 26. If you use this force checkbox and you're referencing a tag, this project will recognize that the tag changed value even if it did not. So if you're using whatever tag in this command animation to drive a field that needs to notice a change, and let's say that the value is 0, and this particular command animation writes a 0 into that same tag, even though that it's done that, written a 0 back where there was already a 0, if the force checkbox is checked, it'll still recognize that as changed and act upon it. For example, one place would be in the communication drivers, the field called write on tag change. If you were to use tag from this and press that button, even though that wrote the same value to it, it would recognize it as a change. And there are several places throughout the product where that occurs. The next checkbox is beep, and that will beep the PC speaker. We can do that, do a quick test here. On this particular button, I will add the beep. If that's on the end one, I'll add the beep, click on OK, and then during runtime, you should be able to hear that beep. And I'm going to unplug my headset so we can record the sound of that when it comes out of the PC speakers. Let's give this a try here. So now when I click on this, I can hear it in my headset. Let me unclick my, or undo my headset. And now you should be able to have heard that while I had my headset unplugged. So that's what beep is, and it beeps the PC speaker built into the PC that you have, given if there is a PC speaker. Go back in the animations and turn that beep off. Now the release is kind of special, and in fact, by default in version 7.1, we've changed the default. In version 7.0 and prior, this release checkbox was not checked. Let me show you how this behaves when it's not checked. Let's change this to write a 1 when this is pressed to X value, and to X val we will write a 0 on release. So that kind of acts as a momentary. And let me just put on here, I'll change the text to be momentary. And I'll put the value inside of curly brackets just so we can see it. So that was X val, and close the curly brackets. So now when we run this, what should happen is we press it, it writes a 1, we release it, it writes a 0. So we press it, it writes a 1, we release it, it writes a 0. Now if we press it and drag our finger off of the button while we're still holding it down, off of the button while we're still holding our mouse button down, that sticks, and I've let my mouse go, but only after I drug it off of the area of that button. If I press it again, it writes a 1. If I release it, it writes the 0. What's happening is it does not see that release if I do the release outside of the boundaries of the button. So the checkbox for the release, go here into config. What it does is it forces that release if you move your cursor out of the bounds of that box. So if we go back here into runtime, and now this will behave a little bit differently. If I press and release, it acts as a momentary button. If I press and hold, and now I drag my cursor off of that button, it forces the release to happen even though I didn't release the mouse button. So that's what the release does. And if you're ever using buttons in a real-world scenario, mimicking real-world push buttons, especially if you're making something move, then I would suggest putting the release checkbox checked. And again, in version 7.1, we've made that the default now. The require confirmation, I'll check that checkbox. And what that does, when we use a button that needs the require confirmation, it now prompts us. You click on that and it says, are you sure? Yeah. Or do you want to confirm that? Yes. And it does that. Now it also confirms the release. Yes. So it might be a safety issue if you have maybe want to make sure that we can do a push button, but we also want to confirm, did you really intend for that to happen, just in case you brushed up against the screen or accidentally ran your mouse into something and it caused a click. The next one, let me say no, and it won't do that function. The next checkbox there in the configuration is the e-signature. I'm going to turn this require confirmation off. Now the e-signature is part of the security system, and I don't have the security system turned on yet, but I can still show you what will happen. Now the e-signature will force the user to re-enter their password to make sure that they have the right authorization to use this particular configuration, of this particular command that is on this button. So if we tell it to do the e-signature, then let's say somebody has logged in with higher credentials than the operator and then walked away. With this checkbox checked, it will then prompt them to make sure that they have the right credentials to use that button at the time they're trying to use it. So let's show you what happens here when we try to run it. And if we try to use that button, it then prompts us for the password. And if I don't enter the right password that's appropriate, then it doesn't let us use that button. The next one under the configuration is the key only. And in order to show you the key only, I have to show you the key first. So let's turn off the e-signature. Now the key feature here is it lets me use a key on the keyboard. Maybe perhaps I don't have a touch screen or a mouse, but I do have a keyboard plugged in. I can type in a letter in this field from the keyboard, or any character for that matter, or I can pull it from this drop down that'll support function keys or keys on the numeric keypad or other keys on the keyboard as well. So let's say that I just type in the letter A. It is not case sensitive. It could be the letter A alone until you modify that with one of these modifiers. So I can have Shift Control A or Alt Shift Control, and of course these options are not enough for everybody. So I'm going to go here to this little browse button, and I could say the left shift only, the right control key, and either the left or the right alt key, and the A key to get that to work. So that's very specific depending on your keyboard. Sometimes they are left or right or both. I'm going to go ahead and disable this just so I don't trip myself up. And then right now that button is just working with the letter A key on my keyboard. If I go ahead and save this and run it, then I'll see that I can use it with the mouse, or I can also hit the letter A on my keyboard, which I'm doing now, which also makes that work as well. Now, little tidbit, little tip, little side note. In a lot of Microsoft's programming environments, they use the ampersand key to dictate what key is underlined and will work with that. So even though the functionality for the key is here, what we can do back on the button, let's say we want to highlight the letter A key, we can put an ampersand in front of the letter A, and it will underline that on the text that shows up in the object. And that will give reference so users will know that the letter A appears. And that's why if you've tried to put text, let's say that uses an ampersand, you didn't see the ampersand. If you do really want an ampersand to appear there, then you need to put double ampersands. So if we want an ampersand to be here, we can put double ampersands, and then a single one would appear. So if you've tried to do that, that's why that works that way. And again, that doesn't dictate the functionality. What does dictate the functionality is here under the config and what key is selected. So now I have shown you the letter A working on the key. If I want to disable the touchscreen or mouse or what other input device we have and say that it only works from the keypad or keyboard only, then I check that checkbox. And now when I run it and go to my animation screen, the mouse is not changing the value, but when I hit the letter when I hit the letter A key, it does. But the mouse doesn't work, but the letter A does. So that's what key only does for you. Back into the animations here under config, and we can also disable that button. Let me turn off the key only here. The disable field will accept a constant or a mathematical expression, logic, other things that you want to put in here. But just for the sake of showing you, if I were to put a tag in here and it evaluated to true, it would disable this button. But for the sake of demonstration, I'm just going to put a 1 in here, which is true, which will disable this button. And when I run this and go to it, you can see that it's disabled. It's grayed out. Now, if you don't want the user to see that particular button at all, maybe based on security level or whatnot, there's a different way to do that other than the disable. What we can do is go back in here, and I will turn off the disable. And instead of using the disable, while we're in there, security, if you put a security level in here, let's say 50, and if I had security turned on, which we'll cover this more when we're at the security video, then this button would be not usable, would be grayed out also if the user was not at the proper security level. So for now, I'm going to show you a different way, and I'm going to apply a position animation to this. And I'm not going to use the movement here, the position, but I'm going to use the show on condition. And I think I did this maybe in the overview, but we'll set something up like xval is greater than or equal to 50. I think I just did greater than in the overview video, but we can see here, we save this and run. Go into the animation. Because x value is 0 right now, it's not showing. If we make this greater than or equal to 50, then that button shows up and we can use it, which then it turns itself off. I don't recommend that functionality in a button, but you can see what's happening here if I want it to hide. Now that might come from security, that might come from a particular mode in the PLC that might enable menus to show or not show based on modes of the machine, security levels, things of that nature. And let's see, back in animation. So I've covered pretty much all the command animations and everything under the configuration. Let's talk a little bit about hyperlink. If I was to put a button, instead of doing a button, because buttons are pretty obvious for the command animation, let me do another object here. Let's put a rectangle, and on the caption, I'll put driver manual. And now when we configure this with a hyperlink animation, we have the choice to put a URL in here. Now this URL can be an expression that builds up a string. Now what I might do is, one of the driver manuals that we have, for example, is the MOTCP .pdf. It's in the driver folder of where Indusoft Web Studio is installed. Well, how do I know where all that is? And maybe I installed it in a different directory, different folder. Well, what I can do is I'm going to double click on this, and in addition here in the object finder to having access to tag names and project tags and system tags, I can also get at these functions as well. So based on all the different functions in here, I can look each one of these up, but for the sake of this demonstration, the one that I want to use is called get product path, and it installs the path where Indusoft is installed. So I'm going to use that. And in this particular field, I need to have it in curly brackets, so it will result in a string in that field. And close that. And notice again that this has open and close parentheses. Now I could have typed this manually if I knew that. Get product path, and that will return where Indusoft Web Studio is installed under C, program files, or if it's a 64-bit operating system, program files x86, Indusoft Web Studio version 7.1. It'll return all that, and then I know that this is in the DRV folder, and that the actual file itself is called motcp.pdf. Now, that will get us all the way and open that in the window here. So I can save that and close it and hit run. Go to animation, click on driver manual, and this will open up Adobe Acrobat, the default reader for the PDF, and show us the manual for that particular driver. Now, I'm showing you an example because I happen to know where that driver manual is, but the PDF could be for the machine. It could be documentation to help somebody change a filter on the machine, training, just notes on different things that might help. So some different ways that you can use that, and not necessarily just a hard-coded string in there. In a similar fashion, let me take that same idea here, and instead of using a PDF, what I might do is just go to www.indusoft.com, which is someplace that you should visit. Take a look at everything that we have to offer, and I'll go back here and change the text, the caption to indusoft.com, and click on OK. Save it and run it. And now when I do this, it's going to open up the default web browser on my PC and take us right into the website. Now, the website may have changed since we recorded this video, but look for updates constantly on indusoft.com. So, let's see. What's the next thing that I wanted to show here? I want to go back in and talk about the bar graph animation in a little bit more detail than we did in the previous video. What I'm going to do is use the Y value here, and I'm going to put this temperature stuff out of the way. I'm going to put another rectangle here, and we'll configure this as a bar graph, and I'll put the Y value here, and it's minimum of 0, maximum of 100, and that's going to grow upward. I'm going to copy this and tell it to grow from the center, and I'm going to copy this again. And notice that I don't have to keep closing and opening this object properties. That's a big feature, a big advantage in Indusoft Web Studio. Other products make you close and dive in and dive out of the object's properties. We can just leave that open, leave it floating. We don't have to keep diving in and diving out. I can take a look at this one. It's up. This one is center. I want to make this one down. And then I want to do another copy of this, and I'll put it off to the edge here, and I'll change kind of the orientation of this. And I'll tell it this one is going to grow in a horizontal direction, and I'll make this one. I know this says up, but it's really the direction either left or right. I forget which one is left or right, but I'll tell it that this one grows from the center, and then I'll tell it this one grows from the other side horizontally. So we have all of those tied to the same. We'll see how those interact here. Save this and run. And now we can see that when we change this, the first bar graph is growing up from the bottom. The middle one here is growing outward, up and down from the center. And the right one here is growing down from the top. And you can see the horizontal ones are doing something similar. Now, let's go back into here. See if there's anything else I wanted to talk about. The foreground color. I think we covered this in the overview, but want to make sure we get a little bit more details on this. The foreground color of the bar graph will actually override the color of the fill in the rectangle itself. That's one thing to note. Also, we can apply a color animation to this if we wanted to change colors, and I'm pretty sure I did this in the overview. But let's say that based on that Y value, that we have a change limit at 33 and at 66, and we change from, we'll start off at green, then we'll go to yellow, and then we'll go to red. Now when we run this, as we slide the slider up and down, you can see that it goes from yellow to red. But a lot of people have asked me when I've done other trainings, how can I leave those stacked and continue to have a green at the bottom, a yellow in the middle, and a red at the top? Well, I know one way to do that. There's probably several ways, but let me show you how to do that. What we'll do is copy this bar graph, but instead I'll make it roughly a third the height of the bar graph. And instead of using this color animation, what I'll do is I'll turn that off. Now, to remind you, I can turn off an animation by unclicking it here. That'll turn that off, and I'll set this one to green in color. That'll be the fill color. And I'll set this minimum of 0 and maximum of 33. And then I'll copy this on top of it, make sure that they're just touching there. And I'll set this one to 34 to 66 and change its color to the yellow. And copy one more time up and make this one 67 to 100. Now when we run this, and I know I didn't get those sized, let's maybe adjust this a little bit, see if we can't. Those the same. And now when we run this, we can see those stacked on top of each other. So now it stays green and then goes to yellow and then goes to red. But you say, wait a minute, I don't want those lines in there. Here's how we can do that. And it's a little bit of work, but relatively minor. I can copy these, select those, hold down my control key, and in this case I'm going to go in and at the rectangle level I'm going to set the border to none, this border to none, and this border to none, and then I'm going to put just a rectangle over its location. I'm not sure if I have that exactly lined up, but you'll get the point. And I'll turn it to transparent or no fill, and I think that needs to be one more grid there. And now when I run it, I've got that over all-encompassing outline there, and I have a stacked yellow and red and green, and oh, I didn't change my top to the yellow there. Let's go back and do that really quick. So here this should have been red, and I can do that to that top section. But wait a minute, I now have that over the top of it, so I can move that out of the way, configure this bar graph to be red, and I can bring this on top of that, line that back up. I could use my formatting tools to align those back up if I needed to. Formatting tools here to line those back up on top. But let's try this one more time, make sure that that works as we think it should. So there's the stack of green to yellow to red. That's one way to do that. Okay, let's move on to the text data link. And here in the text data link that I worked with before, I had temperature, but here I have input enabled, and I have a minimum and maximum of 0 to 100. Well, let's say that I'm going to, and I just as a reminder here, I had that tied to the rotate tag. So let's say I have this set up to be 50, and now when I run this, I can see that my rotate tag goes from 0 to 100 here, but I have a limitation when I enter it here. I still have my keypad turned on. I can go up to 50 and hit enter. Let's say that I try to take this down to another number here. Let's say I take it down to 22. Say OK. But now if I try to enter a number that's higher than 50, let's say 75, when I hit enter, it says it's out of range, and it keeps it at the number that it was. So that's a little bit of a protection to make sure you don't maybe set a set point too high, or an RPM level too high, or a pump value too high, or a temperature set point too high in this case. So that helps protect you for some of that. Also taking a look at the format, you can, let's say I'll copy this down here. I'll add a few more pound signs to the text. And back to the text data link here. I can choose binary format or hex, and you can see those in different formats as well. So let's use binary here, and those of you who know much about binary or can count in binary, this will make sense. You can see my value here is now being displayed in binary. If I set this as a 0, all those bits should be off. If I set it as a 1, just the first bit. 2 will be the second bit, and the third will be the first 2 bits, and I can go up from there. Let's say if I wanted to type in 16, I would have the 16th placeholder for the bit there. So you can see how that works for the format. There's a lot of different formatting that you can do using the text object. There's a format scripting command that you can use, all kinds of features in there as well. Another thing that I'd like to show you is, let's see, what can we move out of the way here? I'm running out of screen real estate. Let's move these buttons up here. The color animation is not locked into just simply choosing the colors from this list. And again, if you need more than just the 4 that are shown here, you can put up to 16 here. We can set this up by limit or by color. And the color is a number in here that represents a red, a green, and a blue value. So I could put a number in here, and I just happen to have one saved off screen that I know is kind of a light green. So I can put a number in here, say, okay, it's that, and I can put a tag value in here to represent that too, which I'll kind of do here in a minute. I'll hit close, I'll save this, and when I run, we should see kind of a light green up here on that. Now, if I wanted to get a little bit more flexible and configure this, I could put tags for red, green, and blue in here by using a command that we have, or a function that we have that's called RGB for red, green, and blue color. And then you have to have tags for red, green, and blue inside of parentheses here. So I'm just going to make 3 new tags called red, green, and blue. And when I hit enter, it's going to prompt me. I'm just going to make those as integers. And those will need values up to 255. So what I'll do is grab the slider up here and make a copy of this slider by holding my control key down. And I'll change this to the tag called red and set this at 255. And then I'll copy this over and make this a tag for green, and make the next one with a tag called blue. So now we have red, green, and blue, and this will result in a number that will represent the red and the green and the blue values. And now when I run this, we can alter that, and you've probably seen interfaces similar to this. When they're all down, all values of zeros, then it's black. And I can move the red up and get solid red. I can move the green up, get solid green, get solid blue, or I can mix. So what does red and blue make? That makes kind of a purple or a cyan color. And if I move them all up to the top, all colors mixed together, it would give us a white. And if we put the sliders all kind of on a similar level, it'll give us a shade of gray, either lighter or darker, depending on how close to the top or the bottom that we're at. And we can mix and match. Now, you might want to take a look at what the company that you're developing for, your particular company or your end customer, and see if they have particular color combinations that they like for particular things, and use this feature to drive objects to be those particular colors. So let's see here. Position slider settings. Let's go talk a little bit about slider settings. I think previously in the other video, in the overview video, I used this button here and configured it as a slider to go to the Y value. Let's take a look to see how that worked here. When we run this, back to the animation, I can move this up and down, and it acts as a slider. And let's go back into here and take a look at a little bit more advanced settings. Here under slider, when we have this checked, I can go into this slider settings And I can disable this by putting a tag in here, and I can go to the Browse button to do that. I can also apply security that will disable the slider feature, but not hide the object itself or disable the other features. It's just the slider settings that are here. Let's see. Oh, another thing to point out is when I have a position animation, these reference points are referenced off of the edge or the point here, but when we're talking with position, it also relates to the resize animation, and those two reference points work in concert. So if you were to resize this object, I think we did the resize here, these reference points work in concert with these reference points and determine what those points are referenced off of. And there's some good diagrams in the help system that talk about that as well. And let's talk last about rotation. And let's get some of these out of the way here. We'll just move some of these on top of each other. Now, if I wanted to make a needle for a meter, what I might do, and this is going to be very crude, is make a triangle. Let's say here, click on here, and finish by right-clicking. I'll go to the properties, and I'll fill this in with maybe a red color, maybe the needle for a meter. And again, we're going to be very crude here. Now, I mentioned in the overview video when we rotate, and I'm going to use the rotate tag in the position animation here, ROT, and go in here, 0 to 100 is what that ROT tag is. I'm going to go start to end is 0 to 360. And again, it's referencing off the top left, which is actually a spot that's the leftmost and the topmost, so it's off over here. We'll try this real quick. When we run this, we can see that it's already rotated here a little bit, that it's rotating around a spot that's right here. But now let's say we wanted to actually rotate around the bottom middle where you might expect the needle to rotate. I didn't draw it exactly. So how do we pick that point? Well, if we reference the top left, it's going to rotate up here, but we want to reference the bottom center. So let's choose bottom center. Wait a minute, there is no bottom center selection. So how do we do that? I'm going to still keep the top left, but I'm going to reference an offset from that reference point. So what I would do would probably be to look down here at the height and width of that object in the status bar down here, all the way down here at the bottom of the screen, and the position or the height and the width of 35 versus 30 for the height, or 130 for the height. I can set up 130 is going to be the bottom edge of that. That's how high this is. And about half of the width, or 35, we'll just say 17 will get us close enough for now. In a production project, I might spend a little bit more time calculating that. Say OK, and close this. And now, when I rotate this, save it, run it, you can see that that rotation point is off of that center middle. Now, another thing that I wanted to point out, a custom way to do this, a little tip that I've learned over time, is let's say that there was a point, a specific point on here that I wanted to reference. When you are selected on an object, it gives you the height and width and the cursor position of that upper left-hand corner. When you're not selected on an object, it gives you the cursor position as you move it around on the screen. Using this to our advantage, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this object all the way up into the upper left-hand corner and tuck it up so that when I'm all the way up there, the point that it is at 0, 0 in the upper left-hand corner. And once I've done that, I can select off of the object and then pick a point where I might want that to rotate. And I can look down all the way into the bottom status bar and see that point is 18,108. Now what I would do is go in here and change this to be 18,108, and it would rotate around that particular reference point. So that's a way to get that reference point and use your mouse cursor to do that. So now I move this over here, say yes, and run. Now you can see that it rotates around that custom point there that I selected. I'm going in 360 degrees. It's not so uncommon to want to make a needle, something like this, rotate maybe from minus 90 degrees to plus 90 degrees. So I can do that in here as well. And when I run this, when it's all the way over, it's at 90 degrees this way, and I can rotate to 90 degrees that way, and it's just a semicircle. I can make any variations between 0 and 360 degrees. I can go to 45 degrees or wherever I wanted to go in there. Another thing that I wanted to point out about rotation, this will be the last thing. No, you didn't make a mistake. I put this wind screen in here while I was off camera, so to speak, and I put a bitmap of a wind turbine. Now I'm going to copy this and bring this back to our animation screen and paste this in. I'm going to take a little bit of time maybe and reduce this down. And again, maybe similar to what I mentioned just a minute ago, I'll tuck this up in the upper corner and cursor off of this and say I want this point right here, which is 105.99 is my custom rotation point. I'll add rotation animation in there, and it's going 0 to 360 degrees, left top, 105 and 99. Say OK. And I could attach this, maybe put a tower behind this or something. But now when I rotate that, you can see that did I not apply about the right tag? How about ROT? And now when I run this, you can see that that turbine rotates around its center point, and that's a way to do that with pictures that you brought in from outside sources. So there's kind of an advanced look at all the different things that you can do with animations. You can build on these, and away you go from there. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. And if you have any feedback, please contact us at info@indusoft.com or visit our website. Thanks, and have a great day.